It's a Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Game day edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website right below. Don't click it. That's not a link. That's a, what do you call it? That's an image. But if you want to go to the website, and you should, just follow those letters right along there, Panther-Lair.com, and type that into your search bar, your browser bar, whatever, and go to the website for the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. We have it all covered right there at Panther-Lair.com. And message boards, where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. All day, every day, Pitt fans are on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com talking about Pitt sports. Panther-Lair.com. You're a Pitt fan, you like to talk to other Pitt fans, you like to talk to other Pitt fans about Pitt sports. You might not always be around other Pitt fans, but on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, you are. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you go post a message there at Panther-Lair.com, you're probably going to get a response and start a little conversation. So that's always a lot of fun. Of course, we have our video wing here, our video arm of the website at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. We do these morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday. Every morning we put out a new video just talking about whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports. And then we also have our Wednesday night live show. We'll be live tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com to talk about everything going on in Pitt sports. Certainly a lot of basketball, football, and recruiting talk. And then, of course, we also have press conference videos and things like that. So you check that out tonight. We're going to post video of the post-game press conference, whether it's Louisville coach Kenny Payne will have his post-game press conference and his comments. We'll also have Jeff Capel and whichever players are made available after this game between Pitt and Louisville at the Peterson Event Center tonight. So you want to make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any of those things. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And I mean, we're going to say before every game, the rest of the way, big game tonight for Pitt. It certainly is as they continue to try and build a case, and not even build a case, but strengthen their position at or near the top of the ACC. And we talked a lot yesterday about what Pitt needs to do to win the ACC regular season title and whether that was a viable goal, if that was an attainable goal. And I think it absolutely is when you look at the remaining schedules and who Pitt has to play versus, I mean, really two sides of it, who Pitt has to play and who the other teams around them have to play. When you look at how, considerably more difficult, say, Virginia's schedule is than Pitt's, or Clemson's schedule is than Pitt, or NC State's schedule, or Miami, or Duke, or Carolina, or Wake Forest, or Syracuse. I mean, you go through the top 9 teams in the conference, the 9 teams in the conference who have winning records in ACC play so far. Pitt has, and I think inarguably, the easiest schedule, or the least challenging, least daunting schedule out of any of those 9 teams. So the path is in front of them. What you cannot do, and this applies to your spot in the rankings, this applies to the net rankings, and this applies to your position in the ACC regular season standings, what you cannot do is lose to a 3-win team. You cannot lose to a team that just recently won its first ACC game of the season. You cannot lose to a team like Louisville tonight, and you can't lose at Florida State on Saturday, and you can't lose to Boston College tonight. I mean, these are 3 games that you really cannot afford to lose on so many levels. And you get past that, they have a game at Virginia Tech. I think that's the following Saturday. That's going to be among the tougher games on the remaining schedule. But after that, they host Georgia Tech. You've got to win that game. Penultimate game of the regular season, they play at Notre Dame. That might be Mike Bray's home finale. I'm not sure if Notre Dame has another game after that, but you can't lose that game. And you really shouldn't lose to Syracuse at home. So, these games, particularly Louisville, particularly Florida State, particularly Boston College and Georgia Tech, those 4 out of the final 8, you cannot lose those games. And it starts tonight when you have Louisville at home, a team that you beat by 21 on the road. You can't lose this game, and it really shouldn't be close. Now, I think there are parts of Louisville that are challenging. Ella Ellis is a good player. I was just reading about Emmanuel Okorafor, who joined Louisville's roster in the middle of January. Young man came from Africa, put up like 8 points and 5 rebounds or something in his debut. He hasn't done as much damage in the last few games, but he's played 3 games and is, he's big. He's a big center and he grabs rebounds, so that could be a bit of a challenge. But again, this is a team you beat by 21 on the road last month. You really should have little trouble dispatching with them tonight. And I think for so many reasons, in terms of, in terms of the ACC regular season standings, you just need to win. That's, first things first. You just need to have another notch in the win column. But in terms of the rankings and the net and NCAA tournament, implications, you need to win big. You need to make this game not close. And that means you need your main guys to be playing like main guys. You need your main guys to step up. All right, I have a few more thoughts on that. Actually, boy, I went back and forth on how to approach this. We obviously have to talk about the Jim Boeheim comments and Jeff Capel's response to them. And quite frankly, I could have talked about this yesterday because Boeheim made his comments over the weekend saying that Pittsburgh bought a team, direct quote, Pittsburgh bought a team. He's bemoaning the state of college athletics and college basketball. Said Pittsburgh bought a team, Wake Forest bought a team. And there's been a lot of oxygen wasted on that topic thus far, not the least of which was yesterday during the ACC basketball coaches teleconference when Jeff Capel was asked about it, Jim Boeheim was asked about it, Steve Forbes from Wake Forest was asked about it. The Miami coach was not on the call because Miami and Duke had a game last night, so John Shire and Jim Larinaga did not participate in the teleconference, so he couldn't be asked about it. But even other coaches were asked about NIL and the state of college basketball. Mike Bray had a lot to say. Mike Bray's great. He basically said, shut up. Stop whining. This is just what the game is now. And so either play it or get out, which I thought was pretty quality. And it's something I've sort of thought myself for a while. So I went back and forth on I figured we had to talk about it on the Morning Pitt here, and went back and forth about whether we should talk about the Louisville game or whether we should talk about that topic first. And I guess we touched on the Louisville game a little bit. We'll come back to it at the end. The Boeheim comments. All right, and Jim Boeheim gave his quotes, I think it was to Pete Thamel of ESPN. In the aftermath of a game on Saturday, he was walking off the court or walking out of the press conference room with Pete Thamel and said this stuff about Pittsburgh bought a team. He comes out with a statement, I think it was Monday morning after everything, after there was all kinds of, to do about it on Sunday. He releases a statement on Monday morning saying, I think it was Monday morning. I get my days mixed up on when this happened. It might have been Sunday night, but I think it was Monday morning. Basically saying, I certainly never meant to say that anyone was doing anything against the rules. Everyone that I know of is compliant. I believe everyone in our league is compliant and blah, blah, blah. And so he sort of backtracked, but he didn't backtrack. He sort of was cowering a little bit. And to be honest, during the ACC teleconference yesterday, he kind of had to eat a little bit of it. He kind of was asked some questions, a number of questions that basically said, don't you guys do the same thing? You've got this mega booster who's bringing Jalen Hurts and all these guys to Syracuse basketball games. They're trying to increase the appeal of Syracuse basketball and make it seem like a big deal and a big event with these celebrities in attendance, not to mention the NIL deals that he's doing with Syracuse basketball players. Aren't you guys doing the same thing? And Boeheim said, well, what I meant when I said that we weren't giving anybody any money is that we weren't giving them money before they got here. We weren't giving them money to try and induce them to come to Syracuse. It's sort of backtracking, sort of not. His backtracking statement was ultimately saying, well, I meant what I said, but I didn't mean that there was anything wrong with that. I just said Pittsburgh bought a team, and I just said Wake Forest bought a team. Not that there's nothing wrong with that. And ultimately, that was probably the most truthful thing that Jim Boeheim said through the whole thing, or the most accurate thing. Because whether or not, and I don't know the details of how Pitt acquired Blake Hinson, Nellie Cummings, and Greg Elliott. I don't know the details of how Wake Forest acquired whoever they added to their roster this season. It seems like there's a decent chance that NIL was involved. It also seems that maybe it wasn't as prominent as as people might assume it to be. But even if NIL was involved, all right, and I know it's not supposed to be pay to play. It's not supposed to be used as an inducement in recruiting. But guess what? It is. All right. And even if NIL is involved, there's been no indication that anything was happening that wasn't above board. So even if Jim Boeheim wants to say Pittsburgh bought a team and Wake Forest bought a team, even if NIL was involved in the roster construction for those two teams, it doesn't necessarily make it illegal or against the rules. There's no indication that Pitt or Wake Forest did anything wrong. I mean, in terms of the rules. And that's kind of what gets me is Boeheim is very much complaining just about the state of college basketball. Now, he happened to pick Pitt and Wake Forest as his, the teams that he was going to fire at. But he's very much just complaining about the state of college basketball and probably by extension college athletics. And this is certainly something we've heard plenty of out of the South Side as well. So let's not pretend like Jim Boeheim's the only coach out there complaining about this, waving his fist to the clouds. Plenty of coaches across the country are getting on their high horses and pedestals and complaining about this, to which I say, save your breath. Save your breath. You're not going to get this undone. What you can do is try to be productive in working toward ways to regulate it and monitor it and make it as above board and fair as possible, but you're not putting these genies back in the lamp. You're not closing these doors that have been open. The transfer portal, as much as you want to say it like it's a curse word, isn't going anywhere. And I've said this a million times. I've said it on podcasts, I've written it and all that stuff. Ultimately, what the transfer portal did and what it has done is, if you want to boil it down to what is the biggest impact the transfer portal has had, and I'm not talking about the one-time free transfer, I'm talking about the transfer portal itself, which is used as a dirty word by so many coaches in college football and college basketball. What has it ultimately done? What is the biggest tangible impact or effect or change? It's made it so that colleges can't restrict where their guys transfer to. Do you remember back in the old days? You had to request to be released to another school. And, the University of Pittsburgh has approved your transfer to all institutions other than West Virginia, Penn State, and anyone on the upcoming 3 schedules. No one in the conference. No one out there. No one out here. You can't go to UCLA. We think they tampered, and so we're going to assert our control over it. You remember these days? I mean, it wasn't that long ago. But we would hear about, they didn't release him to this school, or they didn't release him to that school. Nike Sabandi. Cam Johnson. The transfer portal removed all of that. No more getting released. No more requesting for your school to let you go to somewhere else. If you want to go somewhere else, you can go wherever you want. And now you get transfers within the conference. You get transfers to rivals. You get transfers to teams on your upcoming schedule. It doesn't matter. It's your choice. You get to go where you want to go. That's what the transfer portal did. And you're not undoing that. You might find a workaround on the 1-year free transfer, one-time free transfer. You might find a way to get around that. But you're not changing, you're not getting rid of that basic sort of freeness of movement that was granted by the transfer portal. You're not. And so stop. Stop saying it like it's a dirty word. And then NIL, whatever you want to say about it, it's a basic notion that if a person can make money off themselves, that a guy can say, hey, I'm good at football. People like me. They'll pay for my autograph, or they'll pay for me to be a spokesperson for their dealership, or they'll pay just to have a picture of me doing something. Crazy notion that. And it's fairly ridiculous that was ever really questioned. But it might get abused. Well, college athletics and coaches and administrators have been abusing every ounce of the rule book since the rule book was first printed. Don't give me, it might be abused. Now, if you want to refine the process, if you want to regulate the process, if you want more transparency in the process, knock yourself out. I think that absolutely makes a lot of sense. I'm constantly reminding myself and anyone who will listen that we're still in the very early stages. Did you read about Jaden Rashada, the quarterback who was going to Miami, and then he signed with Florida because he was going to get all this money, and the Athletic actually they got a hold of the contract, the NIL contract that a Florida collective put together with this kid, this quarterback. And it was like $500,000 up front, $250,000 a month for his freshman year, $291,000 a month his sophomore year in 375, I think it was, a month, or 350 or something like that. $350 or $375,000 a month his junior year. That's insane. Now, it's no surprise that that deal fell apart. Probably because Florida never actually had that many, or Florida's collective never had that money to pay him that much. And it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous from the very jump. But when I see something like that, I say, we're still in the early stages. You know, when you talk about, oh, Texas A&M paid $10 million for their recruiting class or whatever it was. We're in the very early stages, right? We love to talk about the free market in this country and the market forces and market shaping the prices and market, dictating this and that. Well, the market's going to figure out that it doesn't make any sense to give a college freshman $250,000 a month, to give a high school senior $500,000 up front. No matter how good you think he is, it doesn't make any sense to do that. And you're not going to do it year after year after year. You're not. Because it makes no sense. And we're talking about college football here, and I'm getting a little bit off track. We're talking about college football where you'll find some of the craziest loons that you're ever going to encounter in any sort of space, in the world, I think, or at least in this country. I mean, people have they're completely lacking for perspective, more in the world of college football than in any other, and college basketball to some extent, than any other space in this country. And even they will come to a point where they say, this is ridiculous. What are we doing? This doesn't make any sense. And so these things, it will, I believe it will smooth into something a little more regulated, a little more transparent, a little more reasonable, and a little more sustainable. Because it'll actually make sense. It doesn't right now. A lot of things don't make sense right now. But eventually it will get there. Circling back to Jim Boeheim and Jeff Capel, I commend Jeff Capel for taking the high road. He had nothing to gain by, firing off, angrily about Jim Boeheim. He was asked multiple times about it yesterday during the ACC coaches teleconference, and he declined pretty much every time. Although he did have sort of a funny remark where he basically said, he was asked about NIL and NIL conversations he had with the transfers that he added this offseason, and he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, Nellie Cummings came from Colgate. Blake Hinson hadn't played in 2 years, and Greg Elliott wasn't even a starter at Marquette. And saying without saying, how much money do you think we needed to get these guys? No, I think there might have been some NIL deals in place, and if there weren't, I think there have been some that came together in the wake of how the team has played, certainly for that guy, Blake Hinson. But how much did you really need in order to land Blake Hinson when a guy hadn't played for 2 years? To land Nellie Cummings when he was playing at Colgate? To land Marquette or Greg Elliott when he was coming off the bench at Marquette? What did you really need there? Now, I thought that was kind of a funny remark by Capel. All right. When it comes back to tonight's game, let's circle back there for a couple minutes. Again, this is a game that Pitt should win by a significant amount. I tell you the thing, and I talked about this yesterday a little bit, the way this team is able to come at you in waves, that you're pretty much always going to get great games from a great game from Jamarius Burton. You're always, I think you're always going to expect a high level performance there. But what's happened is pretty much, while you get that consistently, you're also getting different guys to step up almost every game. I went through and looked to see, just to look back through the season and break down the leading scorers in Pitt's 23 games. Now, they had one game where Blake Hinson and Nike Sabandi tied for the leading scorer. So I'm going to count both of those, all right? But if you look, over 23 regular season games, Pitt has had 6 different players serve as the leading scorer. 6. Blake Hinson's done it 9 times. Jamarius Burton's done it 8 times. Nellie Cummings, Greg Elliott, and Nike Sabandi have done it twice each. And Federico even led the North Florida game in scoring, or led Pitt in scoring in the North Florida game. 6 different players over the course of 23 games. Nobody more than 9 times. And really, you have 2 guys who have about 17 of those 23. So you do have a bit of an imbalance there. But you still got these different performances. And there was actually this great run where the Northwestern game, Blake Hinson was the leading scorer. The next game, NC State, Jamarius Burton. The next game was the Vanderbilt game. Greg Elliott was the leading scorer. Sacred Heart was the next game. Nellie Cummings. North Florida was the next game. Federico. Carolina, you finally got a repeat of Jamarius Burton. And then in the Virginia game, you had Blake Hinson and Nike Sabandi. Over the course of 7 games, you had 6 different players lead them in scoring. I mean, that's a pretty remarkable stat, I think. And, it's even carried into the ACC. Again, you're heavily balanced, or heavily imbalanced with Jamarius Burton and Blake Hinson. In 12 ACC games, Burton has led the team in scoring 5 times, and Hinson has led the team in scoring 4. But Greg Elliott's led him once, Nellie Cummings led him once, and Nike Sabandi had 2 games where he was the leading scorer, or tied with Hinson in one of those. And so you get this dispersal of scoring. You have different guys who can step up at any time. And I think that makes them so dangerous in any game. And certainly tonight, the last Louisville game, Greg Elliott hit 5 threes and was the leading scorer in the game. Pitt's leading scorer. I think leading scorer for the whole game. Nike Sabandi went 4 of 6 from 3 in that game. And so, those are 2 guys that probably, if I told you, all right, give me your top 3 most likely players, or top 3 players most likely to lead the team in scoring on any given night. I mean, you're obviously saying Burton and Hinson, and depending on which way you're leaning that day, you might say Nellie Cummings. Maybe you say Nike Sabandi or Greg Elliott, but I'm guessing that Elliott and Sabandi are down the list of players you would guess as leading scorers, and they end up combining to make 9 threes against Louisville in the last game. Pitt had 14 total in that game, kind of a precursor, got overshadowed by that Wake Forest game when they made 18. But it's a team that can come at you in waves. It's a team that they're going to get Burton going, but it's a question of who else is going at all times. And you never really know who's going to be that other guy. Is it going to be Hinson? Is it going to be Cummings like it was at North Carolina? Is it going to be Greg Elliott like it was at Louisville? Is it going to be Nike Sabandi? Is it going to be... That's probably going to be one of those guys. I was trying to think if there's another. I mean, maybe Federico. I highly doubt it. I think North Florida might be his peak for the season. But it could be any number of guys, pretty much on any night. And that makes it exciting to watch because you're kind of curious who's going to be that hot hand. I think there always will be one, in addition to Burton. But it's always kind of fun to find out who that's going to be. I think they'll get it tonight. I think they'll have maybe 3 guys going. And again, get another win over Louisville. And look for a win where really you can pad some of that scoring margin, that scoring advantage, and try to help yourself, not just in the win column in the ACC regular season standings, but in the net rankings. And I mean, the AP is not going to care that much that you beat Louisville, but you can help, some of the computer metrics by being a little more dominant, kind of like they were in the game at Louisville last month. All right, we'll see what happens tonight, 7 o'clock game. We will have all the post-game coverage at Panther-Lair.com. Of course, have the running game thread during the game, posting news and updates and your comments and questions throughout the game. And then afterwards, we'll have the Jeff Capel press conference, other Pitt players. We'll have comments from Kenny Payne. There'll be a lot on Panther-Lair.com for you to check out. And, of course, right here at YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We appreciate it. And we'll be back tomorrow morning with a Morning Pitt breaking down everything from tonight's game. So don't miss it. Make sure you tune in right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.